My apologies for that interruption. Let's see if we can kind of.
And the teachers teaching English at those levels, they have all expressed how wonderful it is to learn this. Most of them said they never got this in university, that they never even knew that it was important to teach phonics skills as a part of early reading. In fact, Queen Rania Teachers Academy has been so excited about this that they're actually going to continue the program as I've done it this year. So that's been a really big success.
On this fellowship, I've had a lot of opportunities that I would not have had as a teacher in the US. I used my program activities allowance to do a side project working with a UN refugee school where I worked with fourth graders and their teacher to develop a literacy program. I really enjoyed that experience because that actually showed me my creative side. It showed me that I love developing curriculum. It showed me that I could do it. It showed me that I loved research. And I was actually able to implement 3 of those workshops. I got positive feedback from the 3 of them. So it's pretty easy getting around Jordan. Things are within hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, you can get to Wadi Rum, Petra, Irbid, Jaresh. One of my favorite getaways is the Dead Sea. It's amazing. It is the lowest point on earth. You come here and you float and you relax. You get away from the major city. So this is definitely one of my favorite getaways. I'm finishing my second year as a fellow, and after being here for 2 years, I've decided to actually continue living in the Middle East. So being here has broadened my horizons. It has made me a more confident teacher. It has expanded me in areas that I could have never imagined. And I'm so thankful to the program for this opportunity.
The English Language Fellow Program is probably the biggest leap in the dark you will ever take, and probably the most rewarding, life-changing experience you can possibly have.
We hope you all enjoyed that little brief introduction of our program.
All right, so my name is Anna Chiriani Dean, and I'll be co-presenting today. I was a fellow last year in Armenia, and I am currently a virtual English language fellow in the region as well. And I also work as an adjunct instructor at Fordham University in New York, and that's what our virtual world allows us today. And I wanted to mention that I am a graduate of Teachers College, the TESOL and Applied Linguistics program. So if there are any alumni or current students in the audience, I wanted to give them all a shout out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Steingraeber. I was a fellow in Peru from 2015 to 2017. I was also a specialist in Peru from 2017 to 18. I'm now in Washington, D.C. with the State Department as the program officer for the fellow program.
And hello, everyone. My name is Terrell Hawkins. I'm the administrative officer for the outreach team at English Language Programs. I'm also pursuing my Master of Professional Studies in Higher Education Administration at Georgetown University. We first wanted to provide you all with a brief update regarding the program status. With the health and safety of our program participants as our top priority, the English Language Fellow Program has paused in-country exchanges for the remainder of 2020. Although in-person programming is currently on hold due to the global pandemic, the program is accepting applications in anticipation of resuming when conditions allow. For updates on the current status of the English Language Fellow Program, please visit us at elprograms.org. We are indeed recruiting for the 21-22 academic year.
All right, so welcome everyone. Today we're going to be going over some of the basics of the fellow program. So we'll do a program overview. We'll hear a little bit of the alumni experience as we have 2 alumni on this call. Then we'll go into program benefits, eligibility, and we should have some time at the end for any questions that you may have. I will say as well that if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them into the Zoom chat. If we can answer them on the spot, we will. If not, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat and we'll get to them at the end once we get through all of the information. So we're happy to be here today with New York State TESOL. I know that map there was a little small, but you can see that New York, we actually get one of our highest alumni come from New York. That's 89 alumni that we have in that map. I think it's the 2nd highest state just behind California. So if we have any alumni in the audience, please introduce yourself. We'd love to know that you joined us today. Today we are recruiting, as Terrell said, for the 21-22 academic year. The application opened on September 1st. Just a few things, we'll get into eligibility a little more later, but for this program, you must be a US citizen with a graduate degree in TESOL or related field. And projects do require prior teaching experience in ESL or EFL. So we'll move on and we'll have more on eligibility towards the end. So the English Language Fellow Program started in 1969. So it was just last year, almost to the day, that we had a big 50th anniversary celebration with nearly 1,500 alumni to help us celebrate it. This is a 10-month paid teaching assignment. We send US TESOL professionals abroad all over the world to, I believe, about 80 different countries. Fellow projects are designed by US embassies worldwide and really vary greatly from country to country, and it's based on the needs that are perceived by the local embassies in those areas. And most projects do involve some degree of teacher training. All projects involve developing English language teaching capacity and increasing mutual understanding through cultural exchange. Projects are challenging, but in return, participants have a unique opportunity to develop their skills that will really enhance their TESOL careers. So as I mentioned, the fellow program is funded through the Office of English Language Programs within the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Fellows support public diplomacy abroad, along with about 50,000 other participants in State Department exchange programs. I know someone had mentioned Fulbright. Fulbright is in the same department that we are within the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So we're all part of the same family, more or less. Fellows go all over the world, as I had mentioned before, and projects are developed locally by the embassies, by what we call a RELO, or a Regional English Language Officer, who's based in that area. Fellows are assigned to a primary host institution, which could be a university, a binational center, a teacher training college, or any other academic institution. Fellows may live in a capital city, they may live in a rural area, project locations can vary greatly. Applicants who are willing to go anywhere in the world are more likely to be matched to a project than those who have very specific and limited location preferences. So every fellowship is unique, but there are what we've identified as 6 different components that make all projects seem to have. They're all, again, changed based on location, based on host institution, based on the project, but all fellowships have few things in common. They are all full-time jobs with up to 20 contact hours per week and with 10 hours for prep and grading. And then there's an additional 10 hours, since it is a cultural exchange, for teachers and for the fellows to really get involved in secondary duties that are involved and get themselves involved in their local communities. Every fellowship involves all 6 of the components that you see here and to varying degrees, and you'll see these illustrated in different ways. Successful fellows are flexible, resourceful, and responsive to the needs of their community and host institution, and the 6 components provide many opportunities for just that. So as I mentioned, there's primary duties, there's secondary duties, there's an element of public diplomacy and working through the US Embassy. They're based through the community, and they provide the fellow with professional development and also cultural exchange of living overseas in a different country and culture for 10 months. So we'll dive a little deeper into these 6 components and really illustrate them so that you can see what we mean by each.
Most fellowship projects are designed around the needs of an academic host institution. Primary duties may involve teaching undergraduate and graduate courses, participating in curriculum and textbook revision, and facilitating professional development opportunities for host faculty. In Kazakhstan, the fellow taught English language and linguistics courses and hosted teacher training workshops. And from these pictures, she also clearly had some remarkable cultural adventures. By the way, fellows never teach K-12 students as their primary duty, but they do work with K-12 teachers and teacher trainees.
So I was matched with Yerevan State University in Yerevan, Armenia, where I designed and taught courses on the topic of writing for social media. So I worked with a mix of graduate and undergraduate students and offered a variety of courses, including social media marketing, narrative writing, and newspaper writing. So if you look at the first picture here on the top left, you'll see students are working on creating a visual representation of the writing process together. Just below that, you can see that students are presenting puns they had just written to the rest of the class. And then they would go on to turn these puns into digital ads that they added to the online newspaper that they had been working on over the course of the semester. And then the last picture there on the right, it was a really fun activity. Students were acting out different positions and then describing each other as a way to practice description in narrative writing, so descriptive writing. So you can see that there were a lot of fun opportunities with my primary duties.
The majority of a fellow's time is dedicated to primary duties at their host institution, but every fellowship also includes secondary duties that address unique needs and opportunities in the local community. With secondary duties, fellows often have the freedom to tap into their own interests, passions, and skills. This fellow in Togo developed a teacher training program and revised the English department's curriculum for his primary duties. But for his secondary duties, he focused on health and wellness. The top photo shows the community exercise group that he had started with women. Now in the chat box, please tell us, what interests, passion, or skill would you be interested in sharing with your fellowship community? Improv, screenwriting, okay. Some great answers. Music, cooking, some of my favorite, early literacy, volleyball. I love it.
Those are some really great ideas. So in addition to my teaching duties, I decided to also run some informal professional development groups for faculty, which involved a lot of coffee. So on the left, you can see there's a photo of faculty at Yerevan State University having a view party of one of American English's Facebook Live webinars. So every 2 weeks, we would get together at the end of the workday and watch this live webinar, whoever could join. And we would discuss how to apply the principles of the webinar to the local Armenian University teaching context. Similarly, in the second photo, you can see this is an example of another kind of informal gathering that I had. I was trying to create a community of practice. So once a month, I would meet at a cafe with local teachers, and we would talk about their successes and challenges in their classrooms, brainstorm some ideas, and of course, drink some coffee.
Fellow projects are designed by U.S. embassies and local host institutions with public diplomacy goals in mind. For example, in Morocco, a strategic public diplomacy goal is youth participation in civic life through social entrepreneurship, volunteerism, and community engagement. For her secondary duties, the fellow pictured here worked with a local girls' empowerment organization. The fellow and the girls created a running group and met with USA track and field athletes to hear stories of inspiration and perseverance. The culmination of the project was when the girls ran their first 5K in the local community to raise awareness for the organization.
So as a part of public diplomacy, I had a chance to offer cultural events at American Corner. So pictured here is a Thanksgiving event I held for Teenage Club. So I created a trivia game for students to learn about some of the less known Thanksgiving traditions. So for example, they learned about the presidential turkey pardon. And they also learned about the tradition of watching football, which they didn't know about at all. And then also, you can see this flyer on the right. With my university department, I was spearheading an initiative to offer a conference on ELT in the era of globalization. I met regularly with a group of instructors to plan this, and then the conference was slated to happen in April 2020. Unfortunately, it didn't come to fruition because of the pandemic, but the plan had been to make the conference accessible for teachers from around Armenia and to specifically provide funding for teachers who were in remote parts of Armenia so that they would be able to attend as well.
Fellowships are shaped by the geography, culture, and people of their host countries. Often, fellows are able to develop projects to support community needs and interests. This fellow in Indonesia supported the growing tourism industry with an ESP project, providing English language courses to local scuba guides and empowering them to attract the attention of more English-speaking tourists.
One of the projects that I am most proud of from my time in Armenia had nothing to do with my primary or secondary duties. One day I was having coffee with an instructor. We were bouncing around ideas about how to promote some kind of cultural exchange. And we landed on this idea of having a fall festival like you would see on an American university campus. So fortunately, the department had latched on to the idea, and I was able to work with a group of superstar student volunteers to organize this conference. This festival. So in the end, we had a board with leaf-shaped sticky notes where students could write what they were thankful for and paste them onto the board. We then, as you can see in the top left photo, we created props for a photo booth, a fall-themed photo booth with themes from both Armenian and American traditions. There were performances and presentations on American and Armenian traditions. So in that photo on the top right, you can see a student was singing a traditional Armenian song. And then a large component of this festival was a bake sale that the students put together. And they had never had a bake sale in their lives. It wasn't really part of their tradition. So they put together this bake sale and decided to donate the money to an organization that provides funding to families who cannot afford medical expenses for their children who might have some special needs. So it was a really great experience for the students, and it went to benefit a local organization.
Fellows not only build the English language capacity of their host communities, they also experience professional development of their own. Fellows often do activities they may not have had the opportunity to do before. For example, being a plenary speaker at conferences, designing teacher training programs, and serving on convention committees, and taking a leadership role. This fellow in Turkey worked closely with the U.S. Embassy on a teacher training project with nationwide reach, with a focus on underserved communities.
So professional development, as I mentioned, was an essential part of my project, and I made that really the center of my secondary duties. But in addition to the informal meetings that I mentioned earlier, I also offered some teacher training workshops, more formal teacher training workshops for two institutions, Yerevan State University and Armenian State Pedagogical University. For both institutions, I offered 5 to 6 week series of workshops on topics of interest to them, which included topics like strategies for teaching vocabulary, critical thinking, media literacy, project-based courses, and more. It was really great to make connections with the local faculty. And I was really amazed by how open they were to some of the communicative activities that I presented. They were enthusiastic participants, and I even had a fair number of teachers come up to me after or at the following session and tell me which activities they had implemented in their own classes.
Whatever a fellow's primary and secondary duties, there are infinite opportunities for cultural exchange throughout a fellowship. Fellows serve as cultural ambassadors, learning about the rich culture of their host country and sharing information about American culture. This fellow in Mexico had many opportunities to experience the diverse cultural and linguistic groups in her region and to enjoy traditional celebrations. In the chat box, tell us what aspects of your life, local community, and national identity would you like to share with someone from a different background?
So I personally fell in love with Armenian culture and language while I was there. And part of it was because I was so well matched with my host institution. We bonded very quickly. So the picture on the left, you can see I threw a baby shower, an American style baby shower for an expecting faculty member within the first month and a half of my time there. And the faculty really loved it. Normally in Armenia, baby's birth is celebrated after the birth. So this was kind of a new experience, doing it before for them. And they had never experienced the baby themed games and activities that I had organized for them. So that was a lot of fun to share. They also invited me several times to join them on different cultural activities. My favorite was eating khash, which is the traditional Armenian cow foot soup, chock full of garlic and the traditional dried lavash bread. It might not sound appealing, but it was absolutely wonderful. I loved it and went several times to eat it again. So that was just one of the many cultural experiences I had while I was there. And I have created so many wonderful relationships and long-lasting relationships with my friends and colleagues there.
And a few words today from another program alum.
Thank you, Terrell. There we go. So as I mentioned earlier, I was a fellow in Peru for 2 different cycles. So I was there from 2015 to 2017. And just before going to Peru, the then president, just a few months before I was about to leave, announced a nationwide bilingualism initiative where he wanted all Peruvians to be English speakers by the year 2021. So within 6 years, all of Peru would be English speaking, which was an incredibly ambitious plan. But the embassy wanted to support them in achieving this. So my project was changed right before leaving, and I started working with the Ministry of Education in redesigning the national curriculum that is used in public teacher colleges. So this picture that you see here is the big project that we pulled off of when I first got to Peru, we did a needs assessment and I traveled around the whole country, visiting about 5 or 6 different sites, observing classes, meeting with teachers, students, administrators, collecting all their planning documents, all of that. Took it back to Lima, analyzed it, came up with an intervention, trained teachers in it. So the picture you see here is 109 of the 121 public teacher trainers in Peru. We brought them all to Lima. We did a 6-day, very intensive teacher training workshop and then sent them back to their sites. And I spent the remainder of my time going back to those original sites that I visited to see how the implementation was going. And that cycle continued into the 2nd year of my fellowship. So it was a huge project. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot and really got to know the country, got to know the people, and still am in touch with a lot of the teachers from years ago when I was there. The intervention we designed, so the Peruvian curriculum, the national curriculum, is very much just kind of grammar points and lexical sets. In order to be able to change it in a short time, what I did was really want to introduce communicative language teaching into it and task-based learning more than anything, and kind of backwards design. So I took that curriculum, I put together a grid, I sequenced it, I moved all the grammar and lexical units down towards the bottom of the chart and put importance on communicative activities, with the primary being some kind of performative task, and also worked with them on how to do a more holistic evaluation. So that was, in a nutshell, what the training was for.
Now, a quick overview of the program benefits. Fellows receive a $35,000 stipend deposited into a U.S. bank account, and please keep in mind that it is taxed. There's also a living allowance for lodging, food, and local transportation, international travel to and from host country included, supplemental health benefits plans that cover emergencies, a program activities allowance to purchase educational materials and support activities, and if eligible, a tax dependent allowance to assist with accompanying family members. The list of eligibility requirements for the fellow program is short but essential. Those interested must be a U.S. citizen with a graduate degree in TESOL or a related field. If you have a graduate degree in another field, you can apply with a recognized TESOL certificate or U.S. teaching endorsement. Projects require a depth of experience that come with many years working with both language learners and teacher trainees. Now about the application process. The application is completed online, but keep in mind that it is a bit long, so give yourself plenty of time to complete it. You can save and return to any section, and you'll need a minimum of 2 professional references. The applications are for the following, not current academic year. Right now, we're recruiting for the 2021-2022 academic year. The application opened in September, and the priority deadline is December 31. You can still apply after the priority deadline. The deadline is to be fully reviewed and placed in the pool when matching begins in late January. After you apply, your application will go through a rigorous multi-step review process, with final selections being made by local embassies. The application will then finally close in July. Now for the fun part. Do you all have any questions for us?
I have a question. Since it may be hard for people to predict the direction in which their life is going during these times, is it possible to, be accepted and then defer, or do you have to reapply?
No, we can't. You won't be able to defer. This year, something that we haven't mentioned is that we're starting a virtual program, because in response to, I think Anna actually mentioned it, that she's a virtual fellow. So since we don't have any in-country fellows, we started doing virtual programming. So when you apply to the program now, you'll have an option of consider me for in-person, or consider me for virtual, or consider me for both. As of now, we have not started the process for looking at proposals for in-person projects yet. With the uncertainty of the world now, it's just too soon to really start thinking about sending people overseas. We're hoping that we'll be able to send people abroad for the 2021 academic year. So that would be projects starting in September 21. We realize that we might have to be flexible with this. We won't start the process, and we won't start reaching out to people with matches until we're certain that it's going to happen. So we hope by then that if we reach out to someone for a project, that they would have a little clearer picture of what their next academic year looks like. But generally, no, if you're offered a project, there's no option to defer. It's a good question. I did see a question earlier on age limit. The program has no age limit. Age ranges greatly. I think in this last cohort, we had, I think 27 was our youngest, and our oldest was well into their 70s. We get a full range of people applying to the program at different stages in their career. 2 years is the minimum to apply, but it is a fairly competitive program, and our average is more 9 to 10 years if to get selected for a project. Is there an opportunity for language classes? We don't offer opportunities for language classes, but the embassy upon arrival will give you a post-arrival orientation where they will introduce you a little bit to the local context and the people at the embassy. And a lot of times the host institution, if you just ask, is more than willing to help you learn the local language. I don't know, Anna, do you have anything to add about local language?
Well, local language learning was pretty much my initiative last year. So I bought a book before I left, and while I was there, I would spend a few minutes every single night and then just force myself to be in uncomfortable situations where I couldn't understand exactly what was happening. And I actually am quite proud of the progress I made in language learning last year. So if you're determined to do it, you can also, I also recommend asking the local Peace Corps volunteers in the country if they know any language teachers, because they generally have language training and sometimes they might be able to connect you, but it is not part of the program itself.
And just a note on how the program works. You don't apply to a specific project or to a specific country. You apply to the program as a whole. You say, I want to be an English language fellow. If you meet the qualifications, you're put into an applicant pool. Then on the other side, we have embassies around the world that have submitted proposals that they want a fellow to work on. So what we do is we look at the fellows in our pool and we look at the proposals that we need to fill, and we match people based on their professional skills. So what we think that person would really excel at on the duties and the job. We don't pay so much attention to the languages they speak or the places they've lived before. Sometimes it can be helpful and it might factor into a decision if it's close, but again, we really do want this to be a good professional experience. So there's a question of, are you allowed to turn down a project but then accept another? Yes. So in the application, you can indicate your regional preference. So we have different regions and you can say that you're interested. You can say you're open to it, not open to it, or a priority region. And if you indicate that you're not interested in a region, we won't even consider you for a match for that. So if there's a place in the world that you certainly don't want to go to, you can say not interested and we won't make you an offer there. One warning is that the more you limit yourself globally of where you can go, the more you're limiting yourself to projects. But if you are offered a project and you just don't think it's a good fit, you can absolutely turn it down. We put you back in the pool and hopefully we'll find another good match for you. What else do we have? Intercultural training. So before people go out, we do what is called a PDO, or a pre-departure orientation. That is, we bring all of the fellows to Washington, DC for about 3 or 4 days of training. So you're able to meet with some of the local staff from the embassy where you'll be serving. You'll be able to meet with the people who you'll be working with, the other fellows in the region, hear more about your project. We don't go too much into intercultural training, though it is something that we are looking to add into the PDO for next year. But it is just an opportunity to really get your mind around what you're going into, ask questions, and really feel prepared to leave. I don't know, Anna, did you want to add anything about the PDO and any preparation you had before you left?
I think just going into the program overall, the PDO really emphasized this idea of flexibility and adaptability. So if, applying to the program, you kind of have to be ready for whatever comes your way, because every project is going to be different. I saw there was also a question about start dates and end dates of the program, and that depends on the project that you are matched with, and the embassy and the host institution. So every project has a different start and end date depending on the needs of the specific project. And then it's just, I guess, in terms of intercultural training, being in the country is really going to be your greatest intercultural training. So being open to handling whatever comes your way and listening to all of the different cues that you are receiving within the environment that you're in, that is really going to be the key to your success in the program.
And then also just a word, since we're talking project dates. So most projects align with the academic year. So all fellowships are 10 months, but their actual start date might vary. Mine started in October, I believe. Anna, I don't know when you started for Armenia.
September.
So some people even start early in August. We also have off-cycle projects, and those are projects in the Southern Hemisphere that are on the opposite academic year. So since I wasn't working with an academic institution in Peru, I was still a regular cycle, but the school year in Peru starts in March and runs through December, since they have the opposite seasons. And we do have several projects in the Southern Hemisphere that are off cycle. Question on the application. If you were in the general pool, but you weren't selected for a project, you will need to reapply, yes. The application does the proposal system saves your application, so you don't have to completely restart, but I would update it with any new relevant experience that you gained over the last year, particularly virtual experience, since that's something that a lot of us have gained and is a new, highly demanded skill set. All right, we got start dates. What are the regions? Terrell, do you want to go back to the project map in the beginning and we can show the regions? Sorry, I'm making you go all the way back to the beginning. We're in about 80 different countries. It depends every year how many countries, but roughly it's in the 70, 80 range. It's up to the embassies in these countries to really work with host institutions and identify a project. So the projects that we might get a project one year that we don't get the next year. But the colored regions that you see are how the State Department kind of conceptualizes the world regions, and that's how we followed as well. So green is WHA or Western Hemisphere, blue is AF or Sub-Saharan Africa. The orange is the near Northeast, so that's like North Africa and Middle East. Red is Europe, yellow is South and Central Asia, and then the blue is East Asia and South Asia. And I think the countries you see here are where we've had fellows serve in the last 5 years, I believe. So this changes throughout. I think some new ones to add are we're looking at Greenland for next year, or we were going to, and also Japan. What kind of in-country support fellows have once they arrive in country? So some people are placed in what we call a relo country. So that's what I said with the regional English language officer. They are regional. So they have several different countries under their portfolio. My relo was in Peru, so I happened to be in Lima with the relo, which was helpful and a lot more work depending on how you want to look at it. It was great because any project that came up, they went to me and I was just able to do some really cool things. They also hadn't had a fellow in a while, so a lot of projects came up. So I was very, very busy, but it was fun. So you get the country support from your local embassy. If you're not in a country with a relo, you will have your public affairs section at the embassy. You also have the host institution where you have a designated person at the host institution who's there to support you. Anna, do you want to say anything about the in-country support you received? And you also have the team at Georgetown who's there for any administrative needs.
Right. I mean, overall, the combination of all of those different support systems really depends on what your project is, once again. So it's very project dependent, who is going to be the major resource for you in your country. But I do want to say that overall fellows are taken care of very well. You do receive a living stipend, a living allowance, which is designated just for paying your rent and for paying for just general living expenses. And so, you know, in most of these countries, your host institution or the embassy or your relo, whoever is taking care of helping you find housing, they will make sure that you are in a place that is comfortable and that you feel comfortable in. And generally, they tend to be pretty nice, especially compared to the standard of living for the country that you're in general.
Yep. That's a good point, Anna, too, is that $35,000 stipend that we mentioned earlier is just yours in savings. Everyone gets that as kind of their base pay. And then in addition, based on where you are, we calculate an additional living stipend, because some places in the world are more expensive to live in than others. But all of those expenses cover your rent, they cover your utilities, they cover your basic groceries, your commute to work. It's basically, we try to follow a standard of living for, which I saw was another question, for a middle-class lifestyle in that country. And that's determined by the embassy, and it will vary greatly on who you talk to. I know I had an apartment in Miraflores in Lima that overlooked the ocean and had a little mini bar. So it really, yeah, I know. It was great. It was hard to leave. But other people have similar stories. You typically do host families or anything like that. Everyone gets their own comfortable place to live. And safety and security is always a top priority if it's not somewhere where you think you're comfortable being. Okay, going virtual for next year. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we just don't know. We're accepting applications because we want to send people overseas, but we will also only do it if we feel that it's safe to go. With the whole matching process, with the review process for proposals, it does take a while. So we're not going to start that until we're certain that we'll have a program. But we are collecting applications for people. So if it does happen, we're ready to go and we can hit the ground running. We will certainly go virtual next year. That we are definitely doing. It's the question that's still in the air is in country, how many we'll do and when we'll get started. We're also open to flexible options. So next year we're just going to be flexible and adaptable. And yeah, it sounds as if you had the opportunity to be much more influential on educational outcomes than you might be here at home. I would say yes, that is typical. Most fellows end up living this kind of TESOL rock star life while they're overseas. I don't know, Anna, if you had a similar experience, but you know, you end up being a keynote speaker at conferences. People want your autograph and they want to take a picture with you. I mentioned I visited sites twice. So I went to the first site, they took my picture, and when I went back, they had my picture blown up on a banner that said, "Welcome, Maggie." I mean, it's like, you really are treated very well. And you are just given professional opportunities that I just think you otherwise wouldn't get. Anna, anything to add on that?
I think you hit the nail on the head. This is an opportunity. There are so many things that I had the opportunity to do that were just so helpful in my own professional development. And just the flexibility of this and being able to really create, you build your project really as you want it. You have your primary duties and your secondary duties and you're fulfilling those, but you really have a lot of flexibility in what you can do. And so that, I think, is what the strength of this program is. And then yes, TESOL Rockstars is kind of the right word for that. I also have, there was a very small local community of English educators, and everybody seemed to know who I was, even though I didn't know who they were necessarily. So word travels fast, and you're going to be the hot topic of conversation, and people are going to want to work with you.
And then I see a few other questions. We have just a minute, so I'll answer them quick. On dependents, we do allow dependents. If you are traveling with a dependent, we give you an additional stipend to help offset some of those costs. That is $5,000 in addition to the $35,000, which is $500 additional per month. And there's no limit to the number of dependents, but the money's the same whether you have one dependent or 6. We did have one person with 6 dependents last year. 2 years ago. Sorry, I'm totally lost track of time. But yeah, we do try to accommodate dependents as best we can. Virtual option time can range, so it really depends on your bandwidth. Some of our virtual projects that have come in have just been for, a couple hours a week doing presentations or workshops. Others have been teaching full online classes for 10 hours a week. You can put your name in, and if it's something that you don't think you're interested in or have the time to do, you can always say no. So never hurts to apply and see what happens. And then the final question, is there only one fellow per project location? Generally, yes, but not always. There's always one fellow per project, but some places might have more than one fellow. I know in Lima, because that project was so big with the Ministry of Education, they ended up bringing a second fellow for the second year. So there were 2 of us, but we were working in 2 very different parts of the ministry. And sorry, last question. Do you provide remote training? Do you mean the fellows doing remote training for teachers overseas, or for us doing training for the fellows? Because for training for the fellows, one new thing that we've started this last year is we built a training of trainers courses, which is for people who don't have experience doing teacher training. It's just a little crash course in how to be an effective teacher trainer.
And it is excellent.
Glad to hear it.
Okay, thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you.
The time that we have, and really appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to close it out.